This is a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the trial of Scot Peterson, the Parkland School resource officer. Let's go to the courtroom for today's segment number 4.
Okay, I'm going to go back on the record. This is State versus Scot Peterson, 197166 CF10A. I continue to have Ms. Gomes, Mr. Kilburn, Mr. Klinger present for the state. I continue to have Mr. Igarsh present with Mr. Peterson, who likewise is present. We are outside the presence of the jury. State, anything you need me to address before we resume your presentation?
Well, Your Honor, this was the point. We were only calling one witness today. That Mr. Igarsh, I believe, has 2 witnesses lined up for this
They're
afternoon.
waiting. They're ready to go. We're going to try to get them in before, so we
Okay.
don't have to come back tomorrow.
So I'll just explain that we're doing a switcheroo again. We're going to pause the state's presentation. We're going to go to the defense presentation, and then I'll ask the defense to call their next witness.
Judge, if I may, just for purposes of Tuesday, what time do you think we're going to be here Tuesday?
Let me just take a quick look at my
Thank you.
docket on Tuesday. Yeah, I would probably ask the jurors to be back at 9:15. We'll be able to start at 9:30.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay. Okay. Please bring the jury back.
This one is states 7, which from beginning to 2/3. Yes. Thank you. Description. Who's that response? And what I said, we don't have a description yet. Someone right before you says that. Somebody asked that. That is because I don't have a front door. I know you said that. Yes, someone says, do we have?
Jurors entering.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Come on in.
Thank you.
Once you are back at those same seats, you can be seated. All the parties may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you using the notepads, I'll give you a moment to get those notepads back out. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. When we took our afternoon break, we were still in the middle of the state's presentation. Again, as we have done a couple occasions previously during the trial, based on the agreement of the parties, we're just going to press pause on the state's presentation at this point because of scheduling issues. We're going to jump forward to the defense presentation. They have a couple witnesses prepared to testify this afternoon. Mr. Agars, when you are ready, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Deputy Michael Kratz.
Oh, Mr. Savitsky, hold on, what we're gonna play, need the TVs to be off?
Yeah, sure.
It does, okay. Court Deputy Unit, we're gonna need the TVs off, please. Sir, if I could have you come all the way up here to the witness stand, please.
Yes, sir.
Once you reach it, but before you have a seat, you can just stop and look at me, please.
Yes, sir.
Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
Yes, sir.
Please be seated.
Thank you, sir.
And sir, once you are seated, if I can get you to scoot that chair all the way up as far as it will go. Can you please state your full name and spell your full name?
Michael Kratz, K-R-A-T-Z.
And is it M-I-C-H-A-E-L?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Agos, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, Deputy Kratz.
Afternoon, sir.
Can you tell the jurors what you do for a living?
I'm a deputy sheriff with the Broward Sheriff's Office.
And how long have you been doing that?
I've been in law enforcement. I just started my 36th year.
So that would be starting back in 1988, is that
Yes, sir.
correct? And just very briefly, just kind of like highlight what you've done in 36 years.
Everything from road patrol to criminal investigations to burglary apprehension team. Was on the motorcycle unit for 11 years. And I'm currently, I do road patrol, and I'm currently in the traffic unit again, but in a vehicle, not on a motorcycle.
Okay. And do you know Scot Peterson?
Yes, sir.
How do you know Scot Peterson?
When I was assigned to the Parkland district, Scott was a school resource deputy at the high school.
Marjorie Stoneman Douglas?
Yes, sir.
And tell me about the interaction that you'd have with him.
It wasn't too much. Mainly, I would be at the school for traffic issues, traffic enforcement, crash investigation. Mostly would be times where if I wasn't available, Deputy Peterson would handle a crash, and maybe he would ask me to come by the office just to check over the report. He doesn't do that many, so I would look it over, so I'd meet him in his office. I've done that a few times. I was there a few times, several times for traffic complaints. So I would go there for traffic enforcement. I would let him know some of the concerns we've had with traffic issues in front of the school. He'd come out and help. He'd put a traffic vest on and help direct some traffic to help the traffic flow in the morning without hesitation. So those types of things.
Would you characterize his demeanor as someone who was professional?
Yes, sir.
And was he helpful to you?
Very.
Did you ever see times where he evidences being a coward, anything like that?
No, sir.
Just the opposite?
Yes, sir.
Now, on February 14, 2018, during the shooting, where were you assigned?
The Parkland district.
And how did you first learn that there was something unusual going on the campus?
I was running radar at the time, assigned to the traffic unit, and dispatch came over the air, but it was very staticky. Mentioned something I really couldn't understand, but I heard District 15, which is another district. And then seconds later, it sounded like Deputy Peterson came over there about an incident going on at the high school.
And so what did you hear Scot Peterson say over the radio?
Something to the effect of shots fired or possible shots fired.
And is it hearing Scot Peterson's voice that caused you to be aware that there might be something going on the campus?
Yes, sir.
If you didn't hear his voice, would you have continued just doing radar?
Yes, I wouldn't have known there was an issue.
And by radar, just so we're clear, you're like aiming your radar at people and telling people
For
to
speed
slow down?
enforcement. Yes, for speed, correct.
Okay. And was there a sense of urgency for you to get to the campus because of the way that he said it over the radio?
Yes, sir.
How so?
Well, I mean, if there's shots fired or possible shots fired, obviously anywhere, that's an urgent situation. You want to get there as quickly as possible.
And how long did it take you approximately to get there?
I wasn't that far. There was some congestion with traffic with maybe a minute and a half, less than 2 minutes.
Prior to hearing Deputy Peterson announce over the radio possible shots fired over at the school, had you heard on the BSO radio any transmission prior to that concerning the shooting?
Prior to Deputy Peterson?
Yes.
No, sir.
And you're aware that BSO has a different radio than Coral Springs, for example, correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right. So the first transmission you hear is Scot Peterson, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then did you listen on your radio after that time for any type of real-time intelligence?
I didn't hear anything on the way, and I'm traveling code 3, which is lights and sirens. And the first thing I asked over the radio while trying to fight traffic and trying to pass school buses and whatnot was, is there a description?
You asked that.
I asked that, but I don't recall hearing anything between those 2 points that I remember.
Let's get to that point. I'm going to have the state play. Do you remember the exact time that you asked for a description?
I do not, but I believe it was maybe around 2:23. I don't know exactly the time.
Let's start it at 2:24, somewhere around there. Let's see if we can hear him.
State, which exhibit is this? Is this 8?
State 7.
7. Okay.
So 2:24:16, I think, is probably closer to where we might hear that transmission.
901. We're talking about the 1200 building. It's going to be the building off of Holmberg Road. Any descriptions? I'm coming up from West Lake Middle. We don't have any description yet. We just hear shots, but there appears to be shots fired.
Okay, pause it for a moment. Did you hear your voice at all?
That was me asking for a description.
Okay. And then to that, my client responds that we don't
They
have
didn't have a description, correct.
Okay. So did you find him responding to you to be helpful?
I mean, he responded to my question.
Got it.
I don't know if it didn't really clarify anything, but he did respond to my question.
Got it. So you did know that you had no description yet, or at least he didn't have a description at that point, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's at 2:24, I think we see 2:24:30, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you arrived to the school alone or with someone?
I'm alone in my marked unit.
And by marked, that's the one that you can clearly see you're in a police vehicle, correct?
Yes, it was a Dodge Charger marked unit.
And did you have your bulletproof vest on, or did you put it on?
I did not have it on. I had it sitting next to me in the seat.
And so what do? What's the next thing you do?
At that point, Deputy Peterson made a statement, an order on the radio about locking down, when I remember locking down the school and shutting down the road where the intersection. So that was pretty much about the same time, right about after I asked for a description, I believe. So at that point, I'm approaching West Glades Middle, which sits to the west of the high school. So I then decided, per his order, then to go ahead and shut the traffic down, and I called it the dividing line. It was kind of the fence line between the middle school and the high school.
When you heard him ordering the school to be shut down so that people couldn't get on to the school, what were your thoughts? What did you think at that point?
That obviously you want to keep people out of the, possibly out of the danger area or the hot zone or whatever was going on.
Okay. And so what's the next thing that you did?
So I'd immediately pull up to that divider line. I was referring to that fence line because the two schools sit next to each other. And then while I was doing that, I observed a small group of children or high school teenagers on the inside of the fence line that runs parallel to Holmberg Road for the football field. They were coming towards me, kind of in a hurried manner, trying to get my attention, or it would appear to me they were trying to get my attention. So instead of waiting for them to get all the way to me, I wanted to drive forward. Since we didn't have a description, maybe they can provide me with something, any intelligence that I can provide everybody else.
And did those kids give you any real-time intelligence?
I jumped out of the car, made contact with them, so I ended up moving further forward on the football field, and I blocked the traffic there. And I asked them, and they said they weren't sure what it was, if it was gunshots, fireworks, or firecrackers. I asked them, what did they see, what did they hear? They couldn't give me any descriptions. They just kind of pointed in a generally easterly direction. They couldn't give me any information.
Just somewhere east?
They pointed in the easterly direction.
And when you asked them, up to that point, you still had no real-time intelligence as to where precisely the shots were coming from, correct?
No, sir.
Can you show us on the map just generally where you were? At least initially when you got there, and then where you move a little closer. So if you can come down, and if the football field is closest to you at the top,
This is
can you show us?
Holmberg, so this black line would represent that fence line separating Westglades Middle and Stoneman Douglas. My intention was to stop here, but I ended up moving a little further, maybe a third of the way up on the, they call it the 20 or 30 yard line on the football field is where I pretty much encountered the children. So,
Okay, so where your finger is up at the top.
pretty much behind the bleachers. So I've got the roadway, a chain link fence, the grass, bleachers, and then the.
And you're clearly west of, if this is the 1200 building, you are west of the 1200 building?
Yes, sir.
You can't see Scot Peterson from where you are, correct?
No, I cannot.
Okay, thank you. And what's the very next thing that you did, sir?
So as I'm asking several times, can they provide anything, and they were not able to. So as I'm telling them to continue west and get out of the area towards Westglades Middle School, at that point I hear what sound like 4 to 5 gunshots.
Okay, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say you then hear 4 to 5 gunshots?
About 4 to 5 very loud gunshots.
And what did you do after hearing those loud gunshots?
I immediately got on the radio and I advised, because it sounded like they were coming from a southeasterly direction towards the east end of the football field, maybe like the other end zone.
Okay.
That's the direction it sounded like it was coming.
Let's listen to that transmission at 2:25:08.
Tango 2, I hear shots fired by the football field. Shots fired by the football field.
Shots fired by the football field, heard.
Okay. So you can pause it. So that was you at 2:25:08 saying, I hear shots fired by the football field, shots fired by the football field, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, before we get to what dispatch responds, what radio are you putting that out on?
On our Broward Sheriff's Office, I don't have it with me, but police radio.
Okay. And who did you want to hear that announcement?
Anybody that was there, anybody responding there, anybody that needed to know.
Did that include Deputy Peterson?
Absolutely.
And then dispatch responds, I think we heard, shots fired by the football field.
And it sounded like they repeated what I said, correct?
Okay. When you said that, what was your intention? What did you want to see happen when you said it like that?
What did they want to see happen?
Yeah. I mean, did you want to be believed?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I said it as I heard it, and that's what I believed at the time. That was my perception, what was going on.
And when you said by the football field, what were you thinking in your head?
Well, by the football field, I mean, I'm not on the football field. I'm on the roadway stopping the traffic, and I have school buses behind me now, 3 school buses. So I'm being mindful of that. And what I mean is, it sounded like it was coming in a southeasterly direction towards, so I'm at an angle on the roadway, so the football field would have been an angle, and that's the direction it sounded like it was coming from me, and they were very loud.
Did you ever think that the shots were coming from inside a building?
At that time, I didn't think so. I was focusing on the football field. Again, we had no description. I didn't know if there was one shooter, two shooters, three shooters. I didn't know if it was a man, a male, female, white, black, Asian, Hispanic. I know nothing. So at that point, I'm focused on what I heard.
So it never came over the BSO radio that you were looking for somebody in a burgundy shirt,
Not at that point, no.
ROTC shirt,
Not at that point.
black pants,
Not at that point.
white male?
Not at that point.
That never came over BSO's radio, correct?
No.
And so when you say, I hear shots fired by the football field, football field's not indoors, it's an outdoor football field, correct?
Yes, sir.
In your mind, were you thinking that there was, you said that you didn't know if there was one or multiple shooters?
I had no idea.
And however many you thought there were, did you think that they were actually on the football field somewhere?
Objection to leading, Your Honor.
I mean, that's over, it is leading, that's over. Go ahead, sir, you can answer the question.
I mean, I guess at that moment, I heard him coming from that direction, so at that point, I guess I assumed they were in that general area. Outside, it was very loud.
And the next thing you did was what?
So I immediately ran to my car. I was still at the fence line. Ran back to my car, grabbed my vest, threw it on, ran to my trunk, grabbed my AR-15 rifle. Because I now have 3 school buses behind me. It could be a couple hundred kids. I'm now mindful of that, and now I have them stuck in traffic because we don't want them to go into the hot zone, plus some other vehicles. And because I'm thinking shots coming from the football field, all I have for any type of cover at that point is, there's me, a 6-foot see-through chain link fence, and some bleachers. So I immediately ran back to the back of my car when I got my rifle, and I looked back is when I saw the buses pull up behind me and an SUV, and I waved to the one driver to get down because I wasn't sure what's going on. And then I would say pretty close after that, a person, I don't remember who it was, ran parallel to the fence on the inside of the fence, yelling there was somebody was shot, and pointed east, just an easterly direction.
Was that person specific as to where the person was injured? Any specific location?
No, the person just pointed in the easterly direction from the other side of the fence.
Okay. Did you make another announcement over your radio shortly after announcing shots fired, shots fired?
Shortly after that is when I had a male, I believe, at that point I believed he was maybe a coach by the way he was dressed, and he was escorting what I'm assuming was a student. I think he had pants on, and it appeared he had a gunshot wound to his leg. So he was also now walking on the other side of the fence towards me. So I ran up to him, confirmed, look, he had a gunshot to his leg, and that's when I got on the radio and advised we have a gunshot victim. I then stayed with them because I'm trying to be mindful of the school bus with all the students on it. And I'm in the hot zone, so I escort them down the fence line with my rifle to get them out of the area, to get them immediate first aid.
Let me play 22542 and ask you if you recognize your voice.
Attention all units now working to signal 33, go to Bravo channel for regular traffic.
Some students say they thought it was firecrackers and we're not sure. By the football field.
Okay. So that was your voice, right?
I believe that was repeating what the children told me prior to that, so I forgot about that.
And so again, this is now you repeating by the football fields, correct? Yes?
Yes.
And this is while the shooting is going on, correct?
So that'd be shortly after I heard the gunshots, yes.
Okay. And what's the very next thing that you did?
So when I made contact with assumed he was a coach, and the student, they were on the other side of the fence, so I had my rifle. I wanted to get them out of danger so he can get immediate first aid. I escorted them with my rifle down the fence line. They followed me, being mindful of the school buses behind me that I have blocked. And I brought them further down towards the western end zone, at which time I see Deputy Marchese walking in my general direction, and extremely loud. There's sirens, there's police cars. It's quite chaotic at that point. And I'm yelling at him. His first name is Louis. And I'm screaming, Louis, and he can't hear me. I'm screaming several times. I said, I have a gunshot victim. So I walk him further, escort them further down. School buses are here, and I turn him over to Deputy Marchese, which is Louis, so he could bring him further to the middle school to get him out of the area and request rescue.
Can you describe for the jurors how well your BSO radio was working that afternoon?
That afternoon, I had quite a bit of static and a lot of what I call toning, busy signals. When you would key the microphone, you would just get a solid tone. So it just wasn't working properly at that time. And I had a lot of that problem.
Was the staticky scenario making it difficult at all to hear some of the transmissions?
Anytime there's static, it makes it more difficult.
And when you said the toning, when you hit your button to convey information, was that making it difficult for you to put out information?
It makes it impossible to put out information, so you have to keep trying until it stops.
Was this the first time you ever had problems with the BSO radio?
No, sir.
When did you have problems?
Periodically within the district on a normal day. Our Parkland is pretty much extreme northwest of the county, so there's times you could be all the way out west in the district and you would have that problem. I wouldn't even have problems with connectivity on my laptop because you're so far west. There's times in the district office, the radios they'd call you and you'd have to step out into the parking lot to transmit.
Did you ever complain about the radios?
Yes. The supervisors knew, and I believe it was reported to the people that need to know. So it had been an ongoing issue.
When you heard the shots coming from the football field, did they seem close to you or far to you?
It appeared to be coming from that direction by the football field on the east side, but it just seemed extremely loud and almost like they were 30, 40 feet away. I mean, I knew he wasn't right there, but that's how loud it sounded. So when they were that loud coming from that area, and I'm kind of in the open, just a chain link fence, I remember saying to myself, excuse my language, that son of a bitch can see me, but I can't see him, thinking maybe they were shooting at me. I wasn't sure.
You used in your last response, he, and you also used they. Did you ever know in real time whether you were dealing with a he, one person, or multiple shooters?
Not at all. I apologize. I just automatically used the word
don't
he.
apologize.
Whoever that person was, he or she, it could be they, it could have been multiple. I just did not know who it was. I didn't know. I had no description, so that was my perception at the time.
Did you ever include as a possibility that there could be potential sniper fire in the scene?
At that point, anything was possible.
So are you trained to exclude that as a possibility until you see evidence of it, or include it as a possibility and act accordingly?
You have to keep all possibilities open until they're excluded, of course.
Is that why you took a position of cover?
At that point, because it seemed like it was so close and so loud that all I had was that 6-foot chain link fence. So I just immediately, after getting my rifle, I immediately took a quick position behind my car. That's all I really had for solid cover until things moved along.
Did you see other officers taking positions of cover?
Shortly after, yes.
Who did you see?
So shortly after that, I had maybe 2 or 3 Carl Springs police cars that pulled up to my position. One of the cars for sure pulled up along to the right of my car. 2 of the Carl Springs, who were males, took position up behind their car, and then a female Carl Springs officer took a position up behind my car.
We know in retrospect that it wasn't accurate what you say because there wasn't any shooter or shooters at the football field, correct?
I know that now after the fact, yes.
But in real time, when you gave that information, you were being honest, correct?
Yes, sir.
You didn't get it right, but you were trying to be honest, correct?
Yes, sir.
That happens. Does it happen a lot in law enforcement where you try to be honest and then just not get it right?
I'm going to object to the question, Your Honor, in terms of both relevance as well as...
Yeah, that's sustained as to relevancy. Go
Has that
ahead, sir.
ever-
Ask another question.
Has that ever happened to you where you give out what you believe to be information that's accurate, but it turns out not to be accurate?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Yeah, that's sustained. Go ahead, ask another question, sir.
The total amount of shots that you heard that afternoon was how many?
The 4 to 5, I'd never heard any before or after.
And when you heard the 4 to 5, you didn't know it at the time where the shooter was, but did you later learn where the shooter was when you heard the 4 to 5?
Through the investigation of the past 5.5 years, I've learned that he was up somewhere pretty much on the 3rd floor, but at the time I did not know that.
And did you know whether he had made his way yet to the teacher's lounge or whether he was in the middle of the 12th the third floor?
Upon reviewing some of the timelines that were provided, it appeared that he was, I believe, somewhere about in the middle, somewhere.
So when you heard the 4 to 5 shots, he had yet to start his shooting outside the teacher's lounge, correct?
It appears so, yes.
Did you think that your radios were patched with Coral Springs at the time?
At that time, no, I did not believe that.
You what?
I did not believe that to be the case. Well, if they did, I didn't know it. I wasn't hearing any unusual voices from Coral Springs or any unusual call signs that I would not recognize.
Did you ever get the chance to speak to Scott after the incident?
After the incident, we were asked much later at night, maybe 8:30 at night, we were asked to come back to the command post. And I saw Deputy Peterson there, and he seemed to be, I don't remember if I spoke to him or not, but he definitely appeared to be visibly emotional, like he was teary-eyed, and he was very upset, and obviously he was going through a time, and I didn't think it was really appropriate at that time to interfere. So I did see him, but I don't believe I spoke with him. I don't recall.
Deputy Kretz, thank you for your service. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Good to meet you.
Cross-examination, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Deputy. How are you doing?
Good, sir. How you doing today?
I tend to speak pretty quickly. If you need me to slow down at all, like the court reporter always wants me to, you just let me know.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Now, earlier, Mr. Walshe asked you about a time at 2:24:16 when you were when Mr. Peterson responded to a question about a description.
Yes, sir.
Remember that? Did the answer that Mr. Peterson, or the answer that Mr. Peterson gave you was in response to your question, correct?
Yes, sir.
Meaning he could hear you.
Yes, he responded, so I would assume, yes, he could hear me.
And earlier under questioning, you spoke about locking down the school. Did you stay in your area? And I'm actually, Your Honor, if I can use the Elmo and use this now. I'm showing you what's already in evidence of stage 1. Do you recognize this area?
Yes, the football field area, yes.
Normally there's a pencil, but it's not working, so I'm just going to point. If I'm incorrect where I point, please,
Sure.
please tell me.
Absolutely.
So your testimony was that you anticipated or planned on parking around there.
If you can move your finger for a second.
I'm sorry.
Yes, that's correct.
And you saw students coming from this area.
Say about in the middle.
About there?
About, yes.
Okay. And there's a fence that divides where the students were and where you were, correct?
A chain link fence, yes, sir.
So from that area over there, you moved forward to gather intelligence from them, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So once you moved forward, well, moving forward to gather intelligence in an active shooter situation is something you're trained to do, correct?
Yes, sir.
The students pointed east. Is that correct?
Just generally.
Just general.
Easterly direction, yes,
Easterly
sir.
direction.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You wouldn't have learned that easterly direction unless you inquired to get real-time intelligence and moved forward to ask the students that, right?
Yes, that was the reason why I did what I did, to try to gather as much intelligence as I could to pass along to whoever, to everybody that needed it.
Because gathering intelligence, as you learned in training, is really important in these types of situations.
It's critical.
Critical.
It's very important.
Now, ultimately, you encounter a kid who was shot in the foot. Do you remember his name? If I say his name, will you recognize it?
I apologize, I'm not sure.
And that's okay, that's fine. But you see someone who's shot in the right foot, who's being helped out by an adult.
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you saw that child, you immediately tried to help him, correct?
Yes, I approached them at the fence line, and I escorted them. I was on the other side of the fence, but with my rifle, I wanted to get them to safety, being mindful of the 3 school buses behind me. So I was constantly looking back, not knowing where the shooter might be, and I walked them down the fence line almost completely to West Glades Middle, where I handed him
where
off
you were originally going to stop.
in that general area, and then handed him off to Deputy Marchese.
Did you actually try to get the kid over the fence?
No. I just stayed with him, and then Deputy Marchese took over after that.
Because you were trying to protect the kid who was shot and
Yes,
the
sir.
other adult.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, you stated on direct examination that the shots were extremely loud.
That's what I perceived.
Yes. I know this is a hard question to answer, but can you just describe for the jury how loud? Was it like rock concert loud? Well, how loud was it?
I mean, I wouldn't call it rock concert loud, but loud enough to where it felt like it was pretty darn close.
And you thought, while you were positioned approximately there, you said about the 30-yard line,
That's fair.
that you thought it was perhaps around the end zone.
The general area of where your finger is, yes.
Okay. And that's where you were hearing the shots coming
That's where I perceived it to be coming from, that general area.
Now, you testified 3 school buses behind you that were stuck in traffic.
Because of where I was stopped, so just after I heard the shots, those vehicles that I passed getting there now caught up, and it's one lane with curbs on both sides, so there's nowhere for them to go.
Okay.
So now trapped behind me, and now I feel obligated to protect those students also.
Is that area right around there?
Same area, we're pretty much right where my car was, yes.
And you felt obligated to protect those students in the school bus?
Absolutely.
How did you protect them?
Well, I was there, and I'm constantly being mindful and watching around for a subject with a firearm while the buses are behind me. So even while I was escorting the shooting victim, I'm constantly looking back and scanning around while escorting him down, because I don't know what I'm looking for other than obviously somebody with a firearm, because we had no description at that point.
So even when you were escorting the child who was shot and the adult down to the west side, you're aware of trying to protect the school buses behind you?
Absolutely.
And that's something you're trained to do, to take action.
Absolutely.
In that situation, standing still wouldn't have helped the children in the school buses, right?
Not in my situation. I'm speaking
I'm
for
talking about
myself.
just
My
your
situation, it would have not served any purpose to just stand there. So I was moving around.
Now, you never saw Mr. Peterson. He was completely on the other side, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Now, the dispatches that were played, and I can play for them again if you would like me to. When you report the football field, is that information that you're gathering from the students that they're saying that there's a shooting?
No, that's from my perception of where I heard the gunshots.
The reason you stayed in this area is based upon the instruction of the first deputy on scene, telling you, as one of the next responding officers, to lock down that area, including Holmberg, correct?
Well, the school to be locked down and the intersection, the roadway. Yes, and then at one point, to keep everybody back about 500 feet, I believe there was a transmission about keeping people off the sidewalk area.
So that's why you stayed in that area and didn't go towards what you perceived to be the sounds of gunshot?
Yes, sir.
If you had not heard that, testified about, the staticky radio, if you had not heard that, lock down the area or stay back 500 feet, you would have approached the areas where you thought the gunshots were coming from.
I would have continued on trying to find exactly where Deputy Peterson was, and then continued on to assist on trying to find what was going on in the bad guy.
Because your training is to go towards the sound of gunshots, correct?
That's correct.
And if you don't hear gunshots, your training is to try to collect as much intelligence, as much stimuli as possible. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And standing in that position, if not already previously ordered to do so, wouldn't have accomplished that, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall being told over your radio by Mr. Peterson that the shooter was in the 1200 building on the second or third floor?
I believe the very beginning I heard possibly building 12 or 1200, but at the very beginning, but I I don't know the layout of that school. I've only been to his office, so that at the time didn't really mean a whole, I mean, it means something, but I would have no clue where that was, me personally.
If not ordered to stay back there, would you have approached the building to try to figure out where the 1200 building was?
Yes,
Once again, that's real-time intelligence you want to gather.
of course.
When the Coral Springs officers pulled up, were they in 3 separate cars, do you recall? If you don't, it's okay.
I don't remember how many cars pulled up, but if there was definitely 3 officers, 2 males, 1 female.
And you were in a position of cover when they got out of their cars?
Yes, and I'm sorry. Yes,
Yes, okay, so you saw them take a position of cover. You were already in a position of cover?
yes, the 2 males took a position of cover behind their marked unit, and the female officer took position of cover behind my unit.
But then eventually they moved, though, correct?
It was sometime later, yes. I believe it was after we finally worked the way out to unclog the traffic, get everybody out, is when they disappeared. At that point, there was law enforcement absolutely everywhere.
Got it. Just one moment, Charlie. And nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Based on that, you redirect. Yes, go ahead.
Just a few more questions, Deputy.
Yes, sir.
Are you trained to keep people out of a crime scene?
Out of a crime scene,
Yeah.
yes.
And are you trained to keep people away when you think that they might get harmed?
Of course.
Also, you testified that you moved towards those students because you saw them and thought they might have some real-time intelligence to help you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Had you not seen those students, you would have stayed where you were, correct?
Correct.
Also, you said that intel, meaning intelligence, information, is everything, correct?
Very important.
So you continued to monitor your radio after you arrived on the scene, correct?
Correct.
And during the shooting, did anyone ever, either dispatch or any officer, announce to you that shots were being fired from inside the 1200 building?
When I was by my vehicle and the Carl Springs officers were, when the female was with me behind my vehicle and the other 2 Carl Springs officers were taking cover behind theirs, one of the male officers from their vehicle yelled over to me, "Did you hear that?" And I'm like, "What?" I didn't hear anything on my radio. And he said it like 3 times. They go, "What are you hearing?" He said to me, "Possible shooter and victims in the 3-story building." I think he said possibly on the 2nd or 3rd floor. I said, "Where are you getting that from?" He says, "Our dispatch." And I said to myself, that was my aha moment, that they're receiving real-time information that we're not getting on our radio. And that's when I realized that's an issue.
So Coral Springs had that information, and it had not come over your BSO radio, correct?
Correct. So I immediately got over the radio to our dispatcher, and I said, "This is what the information I just received from a Coral Springs officer. Can you make contact with their dispatcher to verify?" So I put that out immediately.
Okay. And that would have been after the shooter is gone, correct?
I didn't know at the time,
Right.
but I believe I learned now that it's...
Okay. And also, at what point do you learn that the shooter is in custody? Where were you and what were you doing?
We were pretty much still in that position, and I believe sometime later, another officer from another agency, after learning that he had already left the campus, he blended in with the children. They made contact with him at another location out in Coral Springs.
When you heard that Coral Springs knew the specific location of where shots were coming from, is it at that moment that you learned that your radios had not been patched?
Yes, I assume that because they were hearing it, and I never heard that information on my radio.
Who is responsible for getting those radios patched so that BSO officers can hear all the things that Coral Springs is getting?
Judge, I'm going to object to outside the scope and lack of personal knowledge.
Well, the outside of the scope is overruled. The other one is overruled, but sir, I don't want you to guess. If you have personal knowledge, you can answer the question, or if you don't, you can say, I don't know.
Our dispatch system, or our duty officers, are generally the ones who put that together. They have the ability, only through many years of seeing it done, or not personally, but I mean over the radio, where they'll patch two different channels or use a common channel, common talk channel, where you could put other agencies, other districts together for a common talk group.
And you've experienced that before, correct?
Yes, sir.
In this case, did you ever hear the radios get patched?
So I can't say they didn't do it. I can tell you that the information that Coral Springs was telling me, I never heard come over our radio, out of my microphone.
Thank you, Deputy.
You're welcome, sir.
Based on that, any recross?
Yes, Your Honor. Just
Go
a few
ahead.
questions. Deputy, when you heard that real-time information from Coral Springs, you immediately put it out over there, correct?
Yes, I put over
Why?
the,
Why?
because it was important.
Now, the real-time information that you would receive based upon training and experiences, first officer on scene.
I apologize. Could you repeat that, please?
Based upon your training and experiences, it would be correct to say that a very good source of real-time information is from the first officer that arrives at a scene.
First officer and whoever has the best advantage of seeing or hearing what's going on.
Okay, nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Agash is the witness excused.
He is, sir.
All right, sir, you may step down.
Thank you, sir.
very much.
Have a good day.
While he's doing that, defense, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense calls Lieutenant Michael DeVita.
Sir, if I could have you come all the way up here to the witness stand, please. Once you reach it, but before you have a seat, if you can stop and look at me, please. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please be seated. Sir, once you are seated, if I can get you to scoot that chair all the way forward as far as it will go, can you please state your full name and spell your full name?
Michael, M-I-C-H-A-E-L, DeVita, D-E-V-I-T-A.
Mr. Agash, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, Mr. DeVita. And I say Mr. because you're no longer with the BSO, correct?
That's correct.
All right. At the time, however, of the shooting, you were, correct?
That's correct.
And how long had you served in law enforcement?
A total of about 28 years.
And when did you, I'm assuming it was retirement?
About a year and a half ago in December.
What do you do now?
I work for a family business restaurant.
Okay. Now, did you spend all 28 years with Broward Sheriff's Office?
No, sir. I worked for 25 years for the Broward Sheriff's Office, and I worked for just under 3 years with the Seminole Tribe.
Your rank on the day of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting was what?
Lieutenant.
And is that higher than sergeant?
Yes, it is.
What district were you assigned to?
I was assigned to Parkland. Sorry.
And Were you a supervisor of Scot Peterson?
Yes.
How long did you know him?
I would have to say roughly just under 10 years.
Okay. Describe for the jurors your interactions with him as his supervisor for 10 years and what kind of deputy he was.
I had to be, I transferred around the sheriff's office a little bit, so I first met him, or I first worked with him when I was the criminal investigation supervisor in Parkland. I was assigned there 3 different times, so that was my second assignment there. And one of my ancillary duties as a criminal investigation supervisor was also to supervise the school resource officers while I was there.
And how did he perform his duties?
Very well. Very well. Scott received the Deputy of the Year in Parkland for the Parkland District, as well as multiple times the SRO of the Year.
An SRO is School Resource Officer of the Year, correct?
Yes, sorry.
And do you recall what year he received Deputy of the Year?
I believe that was 2016.
So that would have been within 2 years of this incident, correct?
Correct.
And what types of cases did he handle?
If I may for a second, like the school resource officers, I believe there was 5 in the city, and we would kind of pick on the guys that worked at the elementary school, be like, oh, you guys gonna do puppet shows for the kids today? That wasn't the same as the high school. The high school was a working man's job and a working person's job. There were fights, there were drugs, there were thefts, plenty of things to keep the school resource officer busy at that school.
And you're specifically referring to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas?
That's correct.
And did you have firsthand knowledge of my client being involved in the investigation of all those particular crimes?
Absolutely.
Did you know him to get involved in violent altercations to try to separate kids?
Definitely.
Did you ever know him to wait on the sidelines and not jump in?
No.
Were there times where he would jump in even without any backup?
Absolutely.
Let me take you back to February 14, 2018. How did you learn first that there was something going on at the school?
I was on the phone at my desk taking a complaint from a citizen regarding an accident report, so I wasn't monitoring the radio or my computer. I looked down at my cellular phone on my desk and saw I had a text message that I didn't hear come in, and I took a look at it, and it was a fellow lieutenant who was then the SWAT commander asking me, his name is Chris McCoy, asking me what's going on at the school. So while I'm mid-sentence talking to the gentleman, I open my laptop and I observe every single deputy that I have assigned in the city is on a current call at the high school, and it says a shooting. So I immediately ended my phone call with the gentleman, so I have to go, and I hung up. And I alerted Captain Jordan that we have to get to the school.
Okay. Did you have a BSO police radio with you?
I did.
And did you begin monitoring your police radio?
I began to monitor it at that point because I was, I ended my phone call and I needed to try and hear what was going on.
Prior to talking on the telephone, were you monitoring your police radio?
I was not.
So you began monitoring it at that point?
Yes.
And did you hear anything that indicated to you, where to go, where the shooter or shooters may be?
At that time, nothing specific as far as where on campus.
Are you familiar with the campus, by the way?
Vaguely, yes. I didn't spend a lot of time there, but...
You had visited the school?
Yes.
All right. And so what's the first thing that you hear on your police radio as you're monitoring it?
I remember hearing deputies yelling, "Shots fired." It's 5 years ago. It's really, I heard a lot of it afterwards. I don't remember exactly what I heard at that particular time.
Okay. And what happens? You report to the school with who?
With Captain Jordan.
And are you riding together?
Yes. Yes, rode together. I drove.
And is this a marked unit?
No, it was an unmarked unit.
All right. And what do you do when you arrive?
I see a whole line of parents, like vehicles, waiting to pick their children up I go around them up over the sidewalk, and I arrive at the front doors of the school.
Was it your understanding that this was, school was letting out at any moment?
Yes.
That's why you saw parents there?
Yes. It was roughly about 2:28, 2:29 that afternoon.
And if there's a potential active shooter on campus, does your training tell you to allow the parents and kids to come into the school?
No.
Tell the jurors why that wouldn't be prudent.
Well, in an active shooter situation, you don't want to add more potential victims to the scenario, so you don't want to invite more people into the school.
And is the area now around the school, is that a crime scene?
Yes.
Do you want parents, kids, people coming into the school and invading on a crime scene?
Absolutely not.
And that's how you're trained, correct?
Correct.
In your close to 30 years in law enforcement, had you ever been trained to do the opposite and let people into the scene at an active shooting?
Never.
And so what's the next thing you do when you arrive at the school with Captain Jordan?
We enter into the administrative offices, the 100 building.
And what happened next?
We had to be let in. The doors were locked. Somebody came and opened the door. All of the employees that were in there were hiding behind their desks. So it made me believe that it's possible that it was close by.
And what happened next?
Captain Jordan got on her radio to advise that she was on scene.
How was her radio working at that moment?
I think initially it keyed up fine. And it didn't take long for it to stop working, though.
Tell the jurors what you mean by that.
There's a situation that occurs, and it's occurred more than once with the radio system with BSO, where a high priority call or situation arises. News travels very fast. Everybody starts to turn their radios to that channel to hear what's going on, whether they're there or not. They're listening to it real time, and it causes the system to what they call throttle. And I'm no technical wizard at this stuff, but with too many users on the radio on the same channel, there's only so much bandwidth that they can use up before you start getting a busy signal every time you try to key the radio. It gives a signal back at you to let you know that your transmission is not going out. No one can hear what you're trying to say.
Do you believe that the radio system that you were given to use on that day was adequate?
I do not.
And so what did Captain Jordan do after she was able to finally be able to key into her radio?
She advised dispatch that she was on scene and basically takes command at that time.
And what happened next?
I saw her getting a phone call, and I just felt like with everybody hiding, I wasn't comfortable standing right in that area. So I went out basically into the main entrance of the school, big red gates and doors behind me, and I covered down on a courtyard, a very vast, wide courtyard.
I want to ask you a little bit more about your radios at that point. Did they ever become okay throughout the time that you're there?
No, not until everything was completely over.
Okay. So from the beginning of the time that you're there till everything's all over, how would you describe the BSO radio system?
It was spotty at best. Some people could get through. I imagine being inside the school with the cement walls and the roofs and everything, it's probably made the situation worse.
So just so we know, when you have cement walls, is it better then to step forward away from the cement walls to try to get better use out of your radio?
Probably.
And was this the first time you ever experienced problems with your BSO radio?
No.
When did you experience problems before?
There was a previous critical incident at the Fort Lauderdale International Airport where they experienced the exact same issue with the radios. But Parkland in particular was very undeveloped in the northwest corners. It was all brand new construction. And we had experienced problems using the radios out in those areas as well. Suspected that we might need another repeater or a tower somewhere to help the signal get to those far-reaching areas, and it was never addressed.
The problems you said that existed at the airport, for example, how long before the Marjorie...
That's sustained. Go ahead, sir. Ask your next question.
Did you ever write in and complain about the radio system?
I had.
No, that's overruled. Go ahead, sir. You can answer the question.
I had, between myself and the previous district commander, we wrote memos and emails to the communications director to try and get some assistance in getting the radios working in those far out northwest areas.
Okay, so tell us what happened next.
While maintaining cover and watching this courtyard, I can tell you that there were no shots being fired at any time while I was there. So my concern was the shooter or shooters looking for an egress, looking for a way out. And I was kind of watching that area that was otherwise uncovered by anybody.
You said shooter or shooters. Did you know how many there were?
We have no idea.
So how are you trained to think?
There's a rule called the +1 rule, where there's one shooter, there could be two. So you're always looking, you never get fixated on one particular area or one person. You have to kind of keep a broad view. You don't know how many there could be.
And when you leave the building 100, do you just walk around upright with no issues?
No, I didn't leave the area immediately. Other officers began to arrive from Coral Springs, literally right behind me, and they had no way of getting in, so I had to back up, open a door with my hand, and allow them to enter.
Were you concerned about getting shot at all?
Of course.
So what did you do to avoid that horrible scenario?
Right up until I let those police officers in, I was positioned behind the big cement column, looking straight down the corridor, not the corridor, but the wide vestibule area.
And Captain Jordan never turned to you and said, hey, let's go to the 1200 building because we know where the shooter's located?
No.
So did it seem like she also had no idea where the shooter or shooters might be located?
Objection, speculation.
Yeah, that's sustained.
Did she ever gesture in any particular direction?
No.
And why do you take a tactical position of cover when you're at that school?
Again, there was a report of shots fired. The people that I encountered when I first got there seemed very upset and scared, hiding under a desk. I thought it was nearby, and I went out to basically further protect them, and assuming that there could be a shooter or shooters out there, I kept myself behind a cement column and kept my rifle pointed downrange.
Using something made of cement is a strong choice, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you ever make your way to the 1200 building?
I did.
Tell the jurors how you did that and why.
The Coral Springs police officers asked me where the 1200 building was, and I let them know it was on the north side of the school, and they said, can you take me there or take us there? And I said, yes, let's go.
Did you know whether the radios were patched at that point?
I can tell you they were not.
How do you know that?
Because the stuff that they were hearing on their radio, I wasn't hearing on mine.
How did that make you feel in that moment?
Like the radios failed us.
What happened next?
As I started traversing towards a north-south corridor to make my way to the north side of the building, the Coral Springs group stopped at a door to the auditorium. They seemed hesitant to walk past any doors without checking to see if they were either locked or who was inside them.
So even they were very hesitant as they're moving on campus, correct?
That's correct.
And what happened next?
They made entry into the auditorium. I stayed in the hallway to cover their back. They asked a bunch of questions of the kids that were in there, instructed them all to stay in place, asked them if they saw anybody or anything. I don't think they gathered any intel from that questioning. Eventually, they emerged out of the auditorium, and we continued to move towards that hallway to get to the north side of the school.
What happened next?
They stopped and checked every door on the way there. Luckily, everything was secured and locked, so we didn't have much more of a delay in that regard. I could see a figure way up at the end of this hallway, and I called out something that we do tactically to make sure we don't shoot each other. I called out blue, blue, which basically is a code for police. We're friendlies. And the person at the end of the hallway waved us on and said, come on, come on. So we kept traveling to that corner of the north side of the school.
Is that a realistic concern that officers have around other officers at a scene, that you could be shot?
Yes.
Explain to the jurors why that might happen.
People work and police work in various stages of dress. They might be detectives, plain clothes, or a regular Class B uniform. If I knew I had detectives with me that were in plain clothes, I mean, it's not normal to see people in plain clothes walking around with rifles and their guns out. So we always want to try and call out ahead and make sure they know that we're friendlies and don't shoot us.
Was it helpful having fewer people on campus to deal with?
Of course, yes.
And so how long did it take you to get from the Building 100 to the area that ultimately became where my client was?
Anywhere between 5 and 7 minutes, I would imagine.
Okay. And then what happened?
I observed Scot Peterson standing there. He had the school radio in one hand and his police radio in the other. He was trying desperately to get information from whoever was on the other end of that school radio. I later learned that that person was monitoring video and watching video footage of the actual shooting, trying to gather information as far as the whereabouts of the shooter.
So anyone who says that my client was standing there doing nothing, that wasn't your understanding, correct?
Objection.
Well, yeah, the objection is sustained pitting one witness's testimony against another. Again, the jury will decide that. Go ahead, sir.
You saw my client on both his police and school radio, correct?
That's correct.
And when you were there, you said that you saw him on his school radio and you believed he was trying to get information, correct?
Yes.
And what else did you see?
I saw some students running from the 1200 building, running out. There was a deputy holding the door open for them.
This is, just so we're clear, this is after the shooting is over, correct?
That's correct.
You don't hear any shots, correct?
Not a single shot.
Okay. And you're looking while my client's on his school radio, correct?
That's correct.
And what was his demeanor like at the time?
He was upset. He was agonizing, trying to get more information. He was.
Objection is speculation.
Yeah, that's sustained. Sir, if you have personal knowledge, you can answer the question. I don't want you to guess. Go ahead.
Okay.
How did he look like to you?
He looked visibly upset, shaken.
And what happened next?
More and more officers are descending upon the school by this time. There are people in SWAT gear, both BSO and Coral Springs officers. Some go inside that first floor of the 1200 building. Others are outside, up against the wall, tight to the wall of the 1200 building. By this time, no one has said whether or not they believe anyone's actually in the building as far as the shooter is concerned. But this is where we're all staged.
When you say they, no one had said that. Are you referring to your radio?
Yes.
You're still monitoring your BSO radio?
Yes.
Was there ever a time that you just stopped and said, I'm no longer going to listen?
No.
And so you're listening, and even as people are going into the 1200 building, you're saying that no one had said over your BSO radio, 1200 building.
Objection is overruled.
That is leading, but it's overruled. Go ahead, sir. Finish your question.
When they said, I heard 1200 building, but I understood it to be the area, because I also heard 1300. I also heard 700. I never heard inside the 1200 building.
Did you ever hear anybody reference the football field?
Yes, I did. I did hear a deputy say on the radio, shots fired at the football field. And I believe he also made contact with a victim, because he called out, I got a victim on the football field.
So could you narrow it down, from listening to your radio, could you narrow it down to any specific location?
No.
Did you ever run into the building when you saw people going in?
No.
How come?
Number one, that there's already people in there. But number two, I'm still waiting to find out where I need to be. And by that, I mean I'm waiting for Peterson to relay information to us that he's getting, at that time, we believe, real-time information.
How long before you left, how long was Peterson on his school radio trying to get that real-time intelligence?
Probably an additional 5 minutes while we were there.
So total time, from the time that you get there to the time that you leave him, how long do you see him on his school radio trying to get information from the video room?
Anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes.
Okay. And then when you left, was he still on his radio?
Yes.
So you're not saying that was the total time that he was trying to get information. That's all that you saw him
Correct.
for. When you leave, he's still on his school radio trying to get information from the video room. Right?
That's correct.
And you understood that to be to find out where the shooter or shooters are located, correct?
Correct.
Does my client ever shout out anything while you're there?
I don't recall.
Okay. And what's the next thing that you did?
One of the SWAT members that was on the first floor called out to us and said he needs keys. I guess some of the doors on the first floor were locked, and they didn't feel comfortable with locked doors behind their back, so they wanted to open every door and make sure the shooter wasn't going to pop out of the classroom. So I went to Deputy Peterson and told him I need his keys, and he readily grabbed them and threw them to me. And I ran them inside and threw them to the SWAT guy. And short time after that is when we learned that the subject was coming down the stairwell.
Let me ask you this. When you asked Scott for his keys, was there any hesitation at all to give them to you?
None.
And your purpose for using the keys was for what?
So that those locked doors on the first floor could be checked for occupancy.
Okay.
Possible shooters.
And when he gave you the keys, was he still on his school radio trying to find out where the shooter or shooters were located?
Yes.
And what's the next thing that happened?
Deputy Peterson relayed to us that the subject should be coming down from the third floor in the stairwell. Meanwhile, we had SWAT officers with rifles trained in the stairwell, and they're yelling back, "No one's here. No one's here."
When you're standing next to my client, could you look up at the building and see into the stairwell to know where the shooter or shooters are located?
No.
Was there any doubt in your mind then that he got that information from his school radio
That's correct.
after people were watching the video?
Yes.
Okay. And what happened next?
It was at that time that we realized whoever was watching the video was not watching it in real time. He was watching it after he rewound it with possibly a 20-minute delay. So this whole time that we're waiting for a pinpointed location for the subject, we then find out he already left through the west doors of this building.
Did there ever come a time that you went into the 1200 building, either to render aid or to assist?
I did.
At what point was that?
I went into the 1200 building to hand Deputy Peterson's keys off, and then I went back in when they said the subject was coming down the stairwell.
But in terms of leaning over and helping with kids and tourniquets and things like that?
I did not do that, no.
Okay. And did there ever come a time where you thought that my client really did know where the shooter or shooters were located and maybe was just faking it?
No.
Objection is a speculation.
Yeah, that's sustained.
From what you saw, did it appear that my client was doing all that he could to assist?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, cross-examination, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. DeVita.
How you doing?
I tend to speak quickly. If you need me to slow down, just let me know, okay?
Okay.
You arrived on scene after the shots had already stopped, correct?
That's correct.
And when you arrived on scene, there was no fire alarm, correct?
No, I didn't hear any fire alarm.
Now, going back to a question about the deputy of the year and the SRO of the year, you actually nominated Mr. Peterson for one of those awards, correct?
Yes.
Which one, if you recall?
I believe it was the SRO of the year.
SRO of the year, meaning that he knows all of his responsibilities and does them as an SRO.
Yes.
And you testified that during fights he would jump in with no backup.
No police backup.
No police backup. Okay. Now, upon direct examination, Mr. Aglash asked you about training and allowing parents into the school area. Isn't it true that during your training, during an active shooting, while the shots are being fired, the priority is to seek out the shooter based upon the sound of the shots or other stimuli?
That's true.
So anything in terms of keeping parents out or traffic or anything like that, that's secondary, or maybe even third or fourth, correct?
Fair enough, correct.
Because you stop the shooter, you stop people getting shot, you stop the bleeding if you seek it out. That's your training, correct?
Yes.
Now, you stated on direct examination that when you arrived with Captain Jordan, initially her radio keyed up just fine.
Yes.
Okay, and you arrived approximately what time?
I believe it was, according to the FDLE timeline, it was 2:28.
2:28.
I wasn't looking at my clock at that time.
Understandable. So around 2:28, her radio keys up just fine.
Yes.
Difficulties happen with the radios happen after.
Correct.
And you and Captain Jordan arrived after the shooting's over.
Correct.
Now, you testified that Captain Jordan took command and you basically needed to go do something. You wanted to be proactive.
Yes.
You're trained to do that. Active shooting, you don't just stand still, you go and do something.
Correct.
And you saw people, administrators or whomever, teachers in the first building, building 1, scared. You went outside to protect them, right?
Correct.
And you were trained to do that.
Yes.
You did something.
Yes.
Then you went ahead and did another thing. You saw the Coral Springs officers couldn't get in through the front gate. You let them in.
That's correct.
And you kind of like paired up with them, right?
I did.
Okay. And then you went northbound, searching the variety of rooms, heading towards the 1200 building.
Correct.
So you're moving towards where dispatch is saying, I'm sorry, not dispatch, Mr. Peterson is saying 1200 building. You're moving towards that, correct?
Yes.
Either to confront the shooter or to, if it's the rescue portion, to help out with the students, teachers, whomever who have been shot or are deceased.
Yes.
And that's based on your training.
Yes.
You were asked on direct examination about the reception, and sometimes you have to step forward from a concrete building to get better reception. Do you remember testifying to
Yes.
that? Now, based upon your training, though, if they're shooting, if you're being shot at, if you think there's sniper fire, you don't step out to call on the radio, right?
No, you wouldn't.
You take that position of cover if you actually think you're under fire, correct?
Correct.
Now, you testified under direct that you were concerned about being shot. I mean, obviously, everybody there was, correct?
Yes,
But you still moved, correct?
I did.
You still went outside Building 1 to protect those teachers, correct?
Yes,
You still teamed up with Coral Springs to move towards the north side, correct?
I did.
And this is all while you're thinking, I don't want to be shot.
Definitely.
But you still acted.
Yes.
At any point in time, as when you're paired up or teamed up with Coral Springs, at any point in time were you guys kind of in a run or a jog?
A fast walk.
Fast, moving quickly?
Yes.
Because time is of the essence.
Yes.
Now you said, and this is just for clarification purposes, someone called out blue.
I did.
You called it out. Was that to Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
It was, okay. Now when you called out blue, what did Mr. Peterson do?
He said, come on up. He waved up.
So that's a proper response, as if he heard you properly, correct?
Yes.
And he turned around, saw blue, and he saw you.
Yes.
Because he's waving law enforcement forward. Because you're not going to wave teachers forward, right?
Right.
You're not going to wave kids forward, right?
No.
Civilians aren't coming forward, it's law enforcement coming forward.
Yes.
And what were you wearing that day?
I was wearing my Class B green uniform.
So like the state,
Yes.
So you're dressed as an officer, no question he sees you wearing your Class B green
Right.
BSO uniform.
Correct.
Now you testified that you were still monitoring the radio, and when you heard 1200 multiple times, you thought it was the area of the 1200.
Yes.
Did you hear Mr. Peterson over dispatch say inside the 1200 building?
I don't recall hearing that.
If you had heard that, would you have changed your actions?
It's hard to say because without that real-time intel, it's shots being fired. You don't know if you're walking into an ambush at that time.
Because you didn't have the gunshot stimuli.
Correct.
And you also said under direct that you didn't run in, people were in there, you were waiting for the defendant to relay information to us.
Yes.
He's the first deputy on scene, correct?
Yes.
He's the school resource officer for that high school, correct?
Yes.
The person first on scene with the most knowledge about the buildings has real-time information, should have real-time information, correct?
Yes.
Now, you stated SWAT needed the keys. You ran out to Mr. Peterson. He threw them to you, right?
Yes.
Do you recall him throwing them to you?
I do.
You run them up to the 1200 building?
Correct.
And you throw them to Seward? Do you recall
No.
that?
I don't recall if it was to Seward or one of the SWAT gentlemen that needed it. I'm not sure.
Fair enough. But you were inside the building. You could see
Yes.
deceased individuals.
I did.
Now, you testified about the video room. Now, when you got up to Mr. Peterson, approximately how many officers were around that area? You can completely ballpark this.
Including myself and the Coral Springs?
Yes.
Probably a dozen to 15.
12 to 15.
Yes.
You testified that he's over the radio, Mr. Peterson, getting information from the video room.
Yes.
And you later learned that the video room, it was delayed.
Yes.
Correct? In training, do you learn that it's more efficient to not have to relay radio communications through a variety of people, like basically like the telephone game? If you can find out information, just you and I, as opposed to going through 3 other people, it makes more sense, correct?
Sure.
Because there can be miscommunications, correct?
Yes.
As the SRO, knowing the layout of the building, with the camera system, it would have made more sense for Scot Peterson to go to the video room, correct?
I can't speculate.
Okay. If he had gone to the video room, though, it would have avoided that extra telephone line, so to speak, the extra communication.
If he was able to relay that information to us with a working radio, it would.
Okay. Now, after you're on the east side, you throw the keys in. Eventually, you make your way west.
Correct.
Judge, if I may. Mr. Reed, I'm showing you what's already in evidence as states one. Yes, it can be shown. Yes, Your Honor. I apologize. Typically, there's a pencil you can use, so I'm just going to kind of trace it and tell me if I'm accurate. If I'm incorrect or inaccurate, please tell me.
Okay.
So when you're coming over from the 1200 building, you're running west this way, correct?
Yes.
Why are you running west?
Because the last known information that we received from that video room was that the subject had left the west side of that, through the west exit of the building.
So you actually ran with Coral Springs officers west to go seek out the shooter?
Correct.
And that's a proactive move?
Yes.
That's something you're trained to do?
Yes.
Because you need to stop the shooter?
Yes.
You didn't say stay in one spot for 48 minutes, right?
No.
You were around Mr. Peterson 5 to 8 minutes, I think you said?
About that, yes.
During those 5 to 8 minutes, did you see anything that struck you as strange from Mr. Peterson? Was his conduct that of, and I know you said he was upset.
Yes.
But did you see, was he still talking on the radio? Was he still acknowledging when people were running by, things of that nature?
Nothing stands out.
Nothing stands out.
No.
You heard the defendant call out over dispatch, stay back 500 feet, correct?
Yes.
Based on your experience and training, that's not taught, right?
I didn't understand the call, but
You didn't understand?
he's on the scene. I'm not.
Did you not understand the call? Because this is an active shooter situation and you're trained to run in to get the shooter?
Like I said, I don't understand the reason for the call, but I did hear it.
I have nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you, sir.
Hey, read your rep. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, sir. So while my client was on his radio trying to get real-time intelligence from the video room, you said that there was a dozen to 15 other officers standing around near him, correct?
Yes.
None of those people were running in the building at the time you saw them standing near my client, correct?
I counted the people that were standing near your client and the people that were at the doorway to that 1200 room.
Okay.
But yes,
So how many people were standing near my client?
I think it was just me and the 4 or 5 Coral Springs officers that just walked up.
Okay. And
How were you feeling at the time?
Stressed, overwhelmed a little bit. I haven't been to a scene like this yet. And it was, it's a terrible situation to be in.
What is tunnel vision?
Judge, I'm going to object outside the scope.
It is, but that's overruled. Go ahead, sir. You can answer the question.
I actually experienced it that day for the first time ever. When I first learned of the shooting and I had to get to the scene, I got the captain with me, we got in my vehicle, and I had such like an adrenaline dump. My heart was pounding. I couldn't see. I could only see straight ahead. I couldn't see peripherally at all. I couldn't see the captain sitting next to me. And here I am, I have to drive. So as I'm exiting the city complex, I can't look to see if any cars are coming out, turning my head completely to the side because I just couldn't see. And it freaked me out a little bit because I'd never experienced that. I remember hearing the captain at one point telling me to slow down, you're going to get us both killed. It was probably a 30 to 45 second drive. It might have taken a little longer, but that's how quick it felt like we got there. And I've heard, I've never experienced that before. So I definitely understand what that means.
You can't train away tunnel vision?
No.
Because cops are human, right?
Yes.
And stress affects cops differently, correct?
Yes.
Did you stay close to a captain from Coral Springs?
Yes, I did.
Tell the jurors why.
It was Captain Brad McKeon, and it was after I left that 1200 building and started searching towards the baseball fields and the field house, looking for someplace this person might hide. I stayed with Captain McKeon because he had a functioning radio, and I could at least try to relay information that Coral Springs was getting to my BSO counterparts.
Did you feel disadvantaged by not having the information they were getting?
Yes.
Did you feel disadvantaged because your radio wasn't working properly?
Yes.
You're aware of the active shooter policy that existed for BSO at the time, correct?
Yes.
Tell the jurors, first of all, what a debrief is, or a debriefing.
Judge, I'm going to object outside the scope again.
Yeah, that's overruled. Go ahead, sir. You can answer the question.
A debrief occurs after a critical incident where you talk about what went right, what went wrong, how can we do things better next time, that sort of information.
The most effective way to do a debrief, would that be to ask just some general questions or be very specific?
Well, I think it starts with a general question and the feedback becomes very specific. You end up getting usually useful information out of doing a debrief.
Did the active shooter policy at the time required a debriefing to be conducted of witnesses of the active shooting?
I believe so. I don't have the policy memorized, but I do believe that. I believe it does.
Okay. Let me just, if you took a look at it, would that refresh your recollection?
Sure.
The exact words?
It would.
Okay, Judge, may I approach the witness?
Sure.
Thank you, sir. I'm showing this one marked as defense exhibit number 2. If you could just refresh your recollection there, please.
Yes, okay.
So is a debriefing required of people who are witnesses to the active shooter?
Judge, I'm going to object to opinion outside the scope, not an expert witness.
No, that's overruled as to both. They're not asking his opinion. He's asking, sir, if you have personal knowledge, you can answer the question. Both objections are overruled. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, it is required according to policy.
And who is the person who's supposed to conduct that debriefing?
The incident commander.
And by the way, that would have included Scot Peterson, a debriefing of Scot Peterson, correct?
Correct.
And the incident commander, is that the highest ranking person on the scene?
Yes.
That wouldn't have been you as lieutenant, correct?
No, it wouldn't have been.
Who was the highest ranking person on the scene?
I believe it was Colonel James Pullman.
Do you know if Colonel James Poland ever conducted a debriefing of my client?
I do not know.
And if Colonel Poland does not conduct a debriefing of my client, who ultimately is responsible to ensure that that gets done?
Judge, I'm going to object to relevance.
Yeah, at this point, that's his thing. Go ahead, sir. Ask your next question.
Judge, if we can just go sidebar on that
Sure.
one point. The prosecutor asked you about my client possibly going to the video room and leaving the scene. You remember him asking you about that?
Yes.
Without question, where my client was the hot zone, right?
Yes.
By hot zone, tell the jurors what that means.
A hot zone is the general location of the incident in question. It would include buildings adjacent to the parking lot in front of. Obviously, after mentioning of shooting at the football field, it would have included the football field. It's basically a danger zone. It's where you expect to find the shooter.
Had my client gone to the video room in the 100 building, he would have been out of the hot zone, correct?
Yes.
That would have been safer for my client, correct?
Yes.
But under the circumstances, then, the only way he would then be able to relay that information to the people waiting for it on scene would be through his radio, correct?
Yes.
And the radios were malfunctioning, weren't they?
They were.
So staying on the scene in the hot zone and announcing what he was hearing over the radio was the best practice, wasn't it?
I believe so.
That's the best way he could be of service to everyone on the scene, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Based on that, any recross?
Yes, just a couple of questions, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
You testified on redirect about that you had tunnel vision on the car ride over.
I did.
You still acted though, right? Even though you had tunnel vision, you were still driving there.
I did.
You still got there.
I did.
When you got on scene, you still went to the 100 building, correct?
Yes.
You still went outside the 100 building to protect the teachers, correct?
I did.
You still teamed up with Coral Springs, correct?
Yes.
You still went north to the 1200 building with Coral Springs, correct?
I did.
You still got the keys from Scot Peterson who threw them to you, correct?
Yes.
You still went west to search for the shooter, correct?
I did.
So you took all those actions even though you suffered tunnel vision on the car ride over?
I did.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Real quick sidebar with the lawyers, please. Press pause on the trial at this point. Again, that schedule, just so we know, update, that schedule estimation that I told you on Tuesday seems to be holding true. So again, number one, big picture, we're way ahead of the original schedule that I gave you, way ahead. Number two, the trial is not going to be in session tomorrow. So even though it was on the schedule for tomorrow, which is Friday, June 16th, I'm not going to need you here Friday, June 16th. Okay? You can go back to your normal lives tomorrow. Likewise, remember on Monday, the schedule, we were never going to be here on Monday. Monday is a court holiday. The courthouse is closed. So the trial is going to resume on Tuesday, June 20th. I'm going to ask you to be at the jury room at 9:15 a.m. 9:15 a.m. on Tuesday, June 20th. Again, no promises. Things are fluid, but it appears, in fact, that the state is going to be able to conclude their presentation on Tuesday. Okay? And then we'll turn to the defense presentation. Or maybe Wednesday. Okay. One of those two. That's number one. Ladies and gentlemen, number two, the juror with the 10-day issue with work, I think Tuesday the 20th would be the 10th day. I'm going to have the final answer for you at that point. I don't want that juror to be concerned regarding the loss of any of the PTO time. I'm still working on that issue, and we're going to have a resolution to it the next time I see you on Tuesday, okay? Ladies and gentlemen, since I'm not going to see you for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, let me emphasize again, please, the same admonition as always. Please do not discuss the facts of the case, the evidence, the witnesses, or the testimony amongst yourselves or anyone else. Please do not do any research on this case, directly or indirectly, from any source whatsoever. Anything having to do with the people, places, parties, anything that you've heard so far in the trial. No research on the internet, on social media, any source whatsoever. I'm going to remind you to please do not watch the news. Do not read the newspaper, okay? If you will leave the notepads in the envelopes in your chairs, they will be waiting for you when you come back. Enjoy your way back at your normal lives Friday. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the holiday on Monday. I will see you all on Tuesday, June 20th at 9:15 a.m. at the jury room. See you then. Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. Everyone can be seated. Okay, I had sustained the state's objection. I did tell the defense that I would allow them to ask any questions they would like of the witness as a proffer, so it would be part of the record if needed. Mr. Igarsh, any additional questions that you have, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Referring to the active shooter policy 4.37.3 debriefing, you've had a chance to review that, correct?
I did.
And it is a requirement that the incident commander be responsible for conducting a debriefing, correct?
Yes.
And the timing of that, it says in a timely manner, correct?
Yes.
Your understanding of a timely manner means what?
As soon as practical.
Okay. So to be conducted the very day of the shooting would be the ideal scenario, correct?
Yes.
Because memories don't get better with age like wine, correct?
Right.
And if for some reason a debriefing is not conducted by Corporal or Colonel Poland, who ultimately is his supervisor?
Sheriff Scott Israel at that time.
Would it have been Sheriff Scott Israel's obligation to ensure that Colonel Poland did his job and conducted the debriefing if he doesn't do it?
I would assume so.
And if the debriefing would have taken place, there would be a written record of precisely what it is that my client was thinking and doing during the shooting, correct?
Yes.
And that would be part of the record, correct?
It would.
And some of the questions that would have been asked would have been, why didn't you go into the 1200 building, correct?
Yes.
Nothing further.
State, do you have any questions?
I did not.
Okay, sir, you may step down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, State, is there anything else that you need me to address before we recess the trial until Tuesday, June 20th at 9:30?
No, Your Honor.
Defense, anything else you need me to address before we recess the trial?
Just to renew my objection, ask that the court allow that testimony to be admitted. I'm assuming the court's ruling, if the court's ruling stays the same, then I would simply renew my objection and preserve that issue.
Yeah, the objection, I'm going to stick with the same ruling. I don't find it to be relevant. It's nothing this jury is going to be asked to decide, but it is over the defense. Objection.
Nothing's on the defense.
I'm going to be in recess until Tuesday.
That wraps up segment number 4 in today's coverage of the trial of Scot Peterson, the Parkland School resource officer. Keep it here and press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage on this case as it continues to unfold. I'm Tony Brueski. Stay with us.
This has been a special report from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.